Hi, everybody. It's Chris and Dan back with another episode of A Father's Love Healing Through Heartache. We want to welcome everybody who's listening. We want to thank you for taking the time to listen to our show. We want to thank everybody on our YouTube channel, everybody on all the podcast platforms, and we want to thank everybody that's listening on WMQL Radio in Brevard. We want to thank WMQL Radio for hosting our show each week. We appreciate it. And we want to thank everybody who's given us feedback, sending us notes of encouragement, asking questions, just telling us how the show is helping you. It means a lot to us. It encourages us a lot, and it helps keep us going. And this week, we're thrilled to have Chris back. If you listened last week, you know that Chris was absent, dealing with some things. And so this week, we're going to just let him talk. And I'm going to sit back and make notes of any questions or comments I have. But we're going to let Chris share whatever he wants to share about what's going on in his life lately. So, Chris, with that, I will turn it over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, great to be back. I really wish I would have been in that last episode with Rob. He's an awesome guy, really bringing some great ideas on how to deal with grief and, his foundation for Aurora. And I really wish I could have been on there to interview him again. But I have a feeling that won't be our last time talking to him. So hopefully I'll get that chance again. But yes, thanks. Thanks for having me back. Obviously, again, I really missed being here and talking with everyone. And last week, it was, I think, Thursday, 2 weeks ago. It was a Thursday night, and we got the call that my wife's grandmother was not doing well, and she was in the hospital. On Friday, we kind of talked about it a little bit, and we were deciding what to do. And my wife and I decided, you know what, we better not take any chances. Let's head up to Buffalo and make sure that Amanda gets that chance to see her grandmother again, at least if this is the last chance. We still had a lot of hope that she was going to do well. And so we were hoping for the best, but we wanted to prepare for the worst. So that's why we got up there. And right when we got up there, we drove to Buffalo on Saturday morning. And then after we dropped the kiddos off and got everything situated, we headed right over to the hospital. And yeah, we saw Amanda's grandma right away. And she seemed pretty well, to be honest with you. She was doing pretty good. She was not great. She was definitely tired, exhausted, you could tell, but you could also tell that she was still in the right mindset. She had her thoughts, and she was doing well. And and as the week kind of went on, she just kind of got a little worse each day, up until the point where she did pass and went to heaven on I think it was Wednesday morning around 1 a.m., somewhere around there. And yeah, it was just really interesting. Not interesting, I don't want to say that's the right word, but as someone who's experienced grief with losing Mason, I obviously have a firsthand experience with grief and how grief affected me. But also, I really got to see other people and an up close and personal view and how they deal with grief at that moment after I had. This is the first loss we've had in mine or Amanda's family that really kind of affected anyone since Mason went to heaven. So the outside view, kind of watching people and how they acted with her grandmother and the different things that were said, the different emotions, they're really flowing. It was definitely intense feelings for a lot of people. Some people really had a lot of sadness. Some people wanted her to pass because they didn't want her to be in pain anymore. Some people, you weren't sure how they felt. They kind of kept to themselves. Some people, you could tell, were kind of preparing themselves mentally, thinking that it is coming close. So it was definitely a difficult time for Amanda's family, for sure. And even with that, it was a difficult time for us, for me and Amanda. So this was definitely Amanda's first time in a hospital since Mason had went to heaven. It wasn't my first time because the other boys had to go to other doctor's appointments and emergency room visits and stuff like that. So I was a little more prepared, and I had to talk to Amanda to kind of prepare her a little bit. Like, hey, some things I didn't think about when I went to the hospital the first time again were the sounds and the smells, like how much they kind of triggered me. Um, remembering very specific things of Mason's loss from when we were in the hospital, and she didn't even think about that. And those are just things that like you can prepare yourself for if you're dealing with grief and you have to go to the hospital for someone else to help out, and you haven't been to the hospital before. Preparing yourself for that mental anguish that you might be thrown your way that you weren't ready for. Even for myself, I found it difficult being at the hospital. I definitely wasn't there a lot. Um, I don't want to say I found excuses, but I definitely wasn't there as much as I could have been for Amanda. But really, I was getting triggered left and right. I every little thing I saw, I was thinking exactly what was happening at that point with Mason, because Mason was in the same similar boat. He was in the hospital for about 5 days before he went to heaven. So, it was definitely stressful in that sense, if that makes sense. So, and with that, Dan, I mean, like, and then it just, once she did pass, some people had that sigh of relief, like they were glad she was in heaven and not suffering anymore. Some were just extremely sad. Um, the funeral experience, going through that again, brought up a lot of memories, of course. And I don't know if those memories will always, it feels like after this that no matter what funeral or loss our family deals with, I think those memories are always going to be triggered of Mason going forward, and yeah, I mean, to be honest, Dan, I even thought about you because Amanda's grandmother wanted to be cremated, and I know Jameson's cremated, and it just made me think about you guys and that decision you guys had to make as well, So I feel like I'm going all over the place here because it was just kind of an all over the place week, to be honest with you. It was really hard to stay focused on everything because there was so much going on. At the same time, the boys were sick while we were home. They, they're around their cousins, they're around new environment, and so they got a little sick. So dealing with all that on top of it, it definitely didn't make the situation any easier, that's for sure. So
Absolutely. I know I can relate to one little piece of your story in that every time I drive by the hospital here in town, it's a trigger that we look at that parking lot and we look at that building and we know that that's where the last time we saw Jameson. Actually, I mean he was. Again, as I've shared before, I think he was dead when I found him in his room. But obviously, in the emergency room when they pronounce it, that's where it really truly sets in. And the only time I've been in that hospital since was a week later when I went in to pick the autopsy report up. But I cannot drive by there, and right across the street is his pediatrician office. And that trip, my eye doctor is right there. So that trip is a trigger every time we go down that road, just looking and thinking about everything that went on in there and leading up to it.
So is there anything that you do to kind of help your triggers? So like when Mason passed, same thing. In a way, this is where I was lucky, right? Because I got to move away from Idaho right away. So all those negative memories, they're still there. I don't see them anymore. I don't live in Idaho anymore. But you still live, in your house, the same house, same everything. And what do you kind of do to deal with your triggers when you see those things? Because I know we kind of talked about how difficult it was for us to move, but at the same sense, it was kind of like a fresh start right away. Like, okay, yes, Mason's gone, but I don't have to see his room. I don't have to, all his stuff was packed up right away. Yes, it was very hard. There's no doubt about it. But, now you have the constant memories still there. I have, I don't have those trigger memories of his school or the hospital or any of those things.
For me, it's the experience that I've gained the last 3 years, and we're coming up this Sunday on the third anniversary, and I've I've learned a lot of the triggers that are around, and I've learned how to deal with them and how to prepare for them as best possible. We've talked many times about things people say, and I think we both agree that we can respond better now to what people say because we're used to it. We expect from certain people, we know that things are going to come out in a very nice, loving, caring way, and other people, it may not be as smooth when they say things, but we've learned to prepare ourselves for it, and we realize that we'd rather have people talk to us even at the risk of saying the wrong thing, because we know the experience has taught us that that's more helpful than it is hurtful. And I think that's how I deal with everything in the house and the majority of our community. We're in a very small town, so it's very hard to go anywhere where there's his favorite restaurant, there's his toy store, there's the soccer field he played on, there's the baseball field that he never got a chance to play on, just everything in the house. I mean, yeah, it's everywhere. Where we've, I think I shared, we a couple months ago we finally finished going through all of Jameson's stuff, and that was just torture. And we we put it off for almost 3 years because we knew we didn't want to do it. And we're literally, when we closed that lid on that box of things that we were going to keep forever, you're literally putting your kid in a box and stuffing him in the closet. And we have a little memorial area set up in our living room with his picture and his urn, and a sculpture somebody made, and some of his most important things that we have best memories for. But Jameson's in a box, literally. And that's hard. I have a hard time going into his bedroom because his bunk bed is still there. We did clean it all out so that it's Reese's room now. But I know that spot where his head was leaning against the wall when I found him. I know that spot where I put him on the floor to do CPR. I know the spot in the living room where literally a year later I found some residue of his vomit that we just had missed when we cleaned up. And things like that are always going to be hard. So it's just, again, it's that experience knowing that they're there. And it's like you spend time preparing for it, like you prepare for other things in life. Of, I know I'm going to have to go into that room for this. And you just kind of work on your mindset mentally to get yourself in the best spot you can. And it's never a good spot. There are the things like the ball fields and his soccer field. Those things are different because there's good memories there. So that I can focus a lot more heavily on the good memories, and that helps get through the hurt that will always be there. I think the hardest thing for me in the house is things like right over there is a Lego table that Erica, Reese, and Jameson loved building together, and they set it up again when we moved, and then Reese and Erica add to it every year. And that's something that it is off limits for anybody in this house. And I am an absolute awful host. I've never been a good host in my home. I like my space and my alone time, but since Jameson went to heaven, I'm just an absolute awful host for any kids. Adults are fine because adults, they know limits. They don't feel like they need to go around touching everything. And before we got everything cleaned up, if there was a kid in the house, I'm hovering over them. Don't touch that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And it just, kids are kids and they're not doing anything wrong, but no, you can't touch the Lego table, because that is a very painful memory because of the love they have. And if you were to break something, drop something that Jameson had put together, that would be total destruction, I think, mentally. And I mean, it's stupid. They're Legos, but they're attached to my boy, and they're attached to my wife. And so things like that are the hardest things. That there are just some toys that you can't touch. Sorry.
No, I agree, and I there's definitely, we have a same thing in our house. We have like a little corner dedicated to Mason, and then we have an awesome chest that my squadron made for us in Idaho. This wooden chest, and some of Mason's most important. Everyone got to put something in there that they thought Mason thought was important. So there's like, I think one of the boys put a water bottle in there, Mason's favorite water bottle. One put in like a Nerf gun, stuff like that, and then a lot of important stuff in there too. And uh, I look at it every day, and I want to open it like every single day and just hold all the stuff, and then I just can't bring myself to do it because I know as soon as I open it, the floodgates open, and it's just, all downhill from there. Same thing though too, like, we really didn't get rid of anything of Mason's. We still have everything of his. Um, and even his clothes, everything is in totes. Everything that he owned is in 5 totes in my basement. And I'm sure eventually, years down the road, we'll get to the point where we'll be able to purge some of it and say, what good is it doing here? And but we're not there yet. So that's kind of like the downfall. Like you had the 3 years to pack it, but then you were ready to let go of some stuff. Where we were. Heck, I packed it myself because Amanda couldn't even walk into his room, and someone had to do it. I wasn't going to let the movers touch it, the moving company touch it. So I knew I had to be the one to go in there, and it was a really rough. It took me 3 days to do because I was crying so hard I couldn't do it. Every single thing I touched had a memory attached to it. Every single shirt, every single pair of shorts, every toy, all that stuff. So, but like you said, you find ways to deal with those triggers and learn to move forward going with them. And if you're listening, don't beat yourself up too much if you haven't found yet how you're going to work through your triggers. It does take time. I feel confident now going to hospitals if I have to. I'm not obviously going to search my way to a hospital just for the heck of it, but taking my little guy to the ER last night, he had an ear infection. We knew something was wrong, and I had no problem walking in there and getting him the help he needed compared to the first time I had to take one of my boys to the ER right after Mason passed, and every little beep I'm looking around and I feel like I'm having a panic attack and my heart is beating 100 miles per hour. So you'll get there. It just takes time figuring out how to get yourself calm to get through those triggers for sure.
So when you were with your family in the hospital or out, can you identify any similarities in the way you and Amanda grieve Mason and how grief of a grandmother, because it's obviously grief. It's the same in that regard, but it's something totally different. Or can you pinpoint any similarities or major differences that would help people?
I think the similarities. I think it comes down to the relationship you had with the person, right? So, of course, I loved her grandmother, but she's not my grandmother. I didn't want her to pass. I really enjoyed time with her, and she was a great woman, and I hope she's doing great in heaven. But I could tell that my grief wasn't the same as Amanda's grief, who has years and years of great memories with her grandmother. and how hard Amanda took it and how difficult it was for her. But, at the same sense, I got to give it to Amanda because she was in the hospital every day taking care of her grandmother, feeding her the best she could, giving her drinks, rubbing her arm, talking with her, trying to motivate her and help her get healthy. And, um, you know, it was definitely different when Mason was in the hospital, because when Mason was in the hospital, it was COVID, right? And only one of us could be there. So when they finally let both of us up there, we already knew Mason was brain dead and she couldn't do anything. And Amanda kind of went into, a shutdown mode, which I don't blame her at one bit. Everyone does it different, and I could see how she has evolved in that sense as well too. But I really think dealing with the grief, and now that Amanda's dealt with, Amanda's been dealing with grief for years because she's also lost her sister when she was a teenager. So grief, unfortunately, is nothing new for my wife, and she is a very strong woman. But at the same sense, there's only so much one person can take in terms of loss. Between losing her sister and then her son, her grandmother, she was very close with her. So we know also that death is a part of life, and that's the hard part as well. It's going to happen to all of us. And yeah, it was definitely, as I think about it now, I got to give a lot of props to my wife. She did a really good job with all her grief, at the same point of still taking care of her and being as strong as she could for her mom, and it was definitely, it was an experience for sure. Yeah, that's all. I can't even think of what else to say about it, because it was definitely different being on the outside looking in. It was definitely a learning experience for me. And I think I learned a few things about myself too, and especially, I definitely didn't want to be in the hospital when all that was happening. It really was triggering a lot of memories with Mason. And I'm hoping as the years keep passing, those difficult memories won't be so hard to control. Like, I'll be able to, um, you know, focus and do what I need to do in those difficult times. But we'll see how it goes, of course.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about comparing you to Rob last week with the roller coaster ride of your situation. It's not a roller coaster; it's kind of down, 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 down. Where Rob last week, he's coming up. Yesterday was the 1 year anniversary of his loss of Aurora, and that's obviously something that's weighing heavily on Rob and his wife. But they're also celebrating because they've got baby number 3 coming, and they found out, if you listened last week, that it is a girl, and they've at least got some of that up part of the roller coaster to, I don't know the right word, not balance, but offset.
Yeah, but there's something to look forward to, something to be happy about, something that they know is going to bring them joy, even though they're going through all this sadness. It is, like you said, there's not much upside to her grandmother passing. It's all pretty much downside. But with them, I was very happy to hear that news. I think that's great for them. And, it looks like Rob is a great dad, and he's going to keep doing amazing things with his children as well.
So how are you handling, we've talked in the past about how do we deal with our grief and at the same time be a husband that can help our wives, be a father that can help our kids. How are you handling that side of things, still grieving Mason, still trying to support your wife who is still grieving Mason, but now also that extra weight of trying to support her losing her grandma or the boys losing their great grandma?
Yeah, I think I think I could have done a better job, that's for sure. I don't think I did as well of a job as I could have. Um yeah, it's it's hard because like you said, the grief weighs on you so much, and you still think about it so much, and then when the triggers come, you try to get through the triggers, but at the same sense, like you said, you have those extra responsibilities of your children and your spouse, and being there for them. I think looking back at it now, I probably would have did a couple things different. I think I would have just toughed through it a little bit more and just stuck it out at the hospital and been by Amanda's side, even if I wouldn't have done anything, even if I was just standing there next to her, rubbing her back, or just letting her know I was physically there for her if she needed anything. I think that would have helped her a little bit more. She says she understood why I had to leave the hospital. But at the same sense, she was in the hospital too when Mason passed, and she toughed through this. And that's part of a marriage sometimes too, is toughing through your uncomfortable positions to help your spouse out. So I think if I had to do it over again, I would have been there more with her. That being said, now I'm just trying to spend as much time as I can with her, making sure she's a priority, the kids are a priority. It's so easy in life to just get so tunnel visioned with your own stuff. I mean, I think kind of by nature, humans have this own kind of selfish aspect, right? They want what they want. They want to do it their way. And I'm no different. I'm a human. I get tunnel visioned with stuff that's important to me. And I think through these last 2 years, with losing Mason and then seeing Amanda with grief from losing her grandmother, I'm seeing more and more of the need to um, put some of my own stuff aside. And I think the hard part for dads specifically, or for men trying to help their spouses, we're fixers, right? Men like to try to fix stuff. And typically, or at least with my household, I don't know if this is all, spouses dealing with grief. My wife, she's not looking for a fix. She's looking for someone to just be there with her and spend time with her. And she knows that I'm someone that she can lean on emotionally, not physically, not me go fix this or fix that or do this or do that or take this off her plate. That's not what she's looking for. So, maybe if you're dealing with grief and your spouse is dealing with grief at the same time, you got to reevaluate your own priorities and say, okay, what's more important here? Is it better if I go make sure my spouse is okay, and not worry about some of my own stuff and just be there emotionally for them? I think if I would have did that, my wife might have done a little bit better. I don't know. I know it was still going to be hard no matter what, but um, I think I could have did a better job with that overall. So
But I think that's so easy to say it now, but yeah, I mean, yeah, so hard. I imagine because I wasn't there. So hard to do because you're throwing yourself right in the middle of some of the biggest triggers possible. If you go support your wife, and if you don't support your wife, then that's all obvious. The consequences there. Where I know you hate this phrase. You're getting better with it, but I can't imagine. Uh, it's just there are times though that we do have to throw ourselves into the triggers because we're still here living our life. We're still here with our family, and we can't avoid the whole world as much as we'd like to sometimes. So we have to hit things head on and hope that we can come out somewhat unscathed.
yeah, for sure. And I think I did the best that I could at that moment. But I think that moment kind of made me a stronger person now as well, because now I think if something like this happens again, I have the tools, mentally, to know what needs to be done to be there successfully. Ensuring I'm there emotionally for my wife and my children, um, instead of trying to be that fixer dad that try and fix everything, and okay, you just go worry about this, I'll do this, and this. And they're not looking for that. They're not looking to take stuff off their plate. They're just looking for someone to emotionally be there for them. And for guys and for dads, that can be really difficult sometimes. Um, I think I'm getting better at it, but it takes time. I mean, there's no doubt it's not an easy task, because we think about things differently. We have different priorities, different ways we do things, and it was definitely. I do think I'm more prepared if something like that happens again in the future, to be more supportive and be more helpful. And I do think, since I got through this one now, after Mason and now her grandmother, I think I could be more prepared for anyone that will come in the future as well.
I think maybe that's one of the biggest points for people who are on the mountaintops of life right now and not dealing with anything too heavy. It's another great example of a way you can step up and help people. If, God forbid, you know somebody in today's society with COVID and everything, I guess the chances are pretty high that you know somebody that's dealing with grief for the second time, third time, fourth time. Maybe there's ways there that you can really step in and help those people by sitting there at the hospital bed, so that the spouse or whatever other relative or dear friend who's having triggers, they can step away for a few minutes and try to hopefully get composed somewhat. Maybe you can step in and take the kids to help, so that they don't have to be at the hospital the whole time if they don't want to be. I don't know, it just seems like maybe there's a lot of opportunity for you to step in and help if, God forbid, you're in that situation where you know somebody dealing with multiple losses.
Yeah, let me just throw this plug in there too. Before Mason passed, I had just finished training to be a hospice volunteer. I don't know what made me want to do it, but I thought, I was like, you know what? I think I can do this. I think what it was is I was told that there were a lot of military veterans that were dying on their own in hospice, and I just didn't like that idea of someone being alone, or they only have one or two family members that can really never take a break. So if you're looking for some way that you can help, the training is very easy. It only took me one full day of training, and you can be that support, that emotional support for someone if you think you're strong enough to handle it. But you have to go into it too, if you're going into hospice, knowing that they're probably going to pass while you're there. You don't know when, but you could become really good friends with some of these people, and they're going to pass. So if you think you're up to that, that's something to consider too. Check out their website. And the training was really good. And of course, right when I finished the training, COVID hit, so they weren't letting people volunteer with hospice because they didn't want other people to get COVID. Right. So, and I just, since Mason, I of course haven't gotten back into it. I don't think I'm ready yet, but just want to throw that plug in there, Dan. I thought that was a good idea. If you think you can help others.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, I mean, I don't know what to say, bud. Just other than I love you, and I'm glad I get to walk with you, and I'm glad that you have this avenue to just talk and share your thoughts and help with your grief now on a whole new level.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I'm glad to be back. I really wanted to do that episode last week, and but that was basically when you guys recorded. That was her last night there, and I knew I wasn't gonna be able to break away from any of that. So, of course, we didn't know that at the time, but we could tell it was starting to go downhill a little bit. And it feels good to be back. It feels good to be talking with everyone, and coming up with different ideas with Dan of what we're gonna be talking about in the future going forward. Again, if you guys think of anything that you want us to specifically address or talk about, or you want to come on and talk about it, we're open books. We try our best to be as honest and open about everything. So don't be afraid to shoot us that message and say, hey, let's talk about this. We would love that for sure.
Absolutely. Any last words, Chris?
No, sorry everyone. This is kind of a shorter episode. Yeah, it's good to be back, and I look forward to the upcoming plans that Dan and I have going forward. as we try to help people with their grief and as we're still dealing with our grief. So, but with that, I'm going to throw it back over to you, Dan.
All right. So again, thank you to everybody who's listening, who's reaching out. It is very encouraging when Chris and I get notes from people that hear something that they like. I had just the other day in carpool, I had some lady drop her kid off and she drove by me and screaming out the window, "I listen to your podcast!" And I don't know why she's listening, if she needs the advice or if she just is curious of what somebody in the community is talking about, whatever. But in that really weird screaming lady at carpool kind of way, it was encouraging, and it was nice to hear that we got a little feedback. So thank you all for listening. And again, as always, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, you can send them to Chris at Miles for Mason Memorial. That's his website, milesformasonmemorial.com. And Chris at milesformasonmemorial.com is the email, right, Chris? I'm trying. And then Miles for Mason on Facebook. And you can reach me at Jameson's Joy on Facebook or info@jamesonsjoy.org as our email. And we'd love to just listen to whatever's on your heart. And so we hope everybody has a wonderful week. And until next time, we'll see you again on A Father's Love, Healing Through Heartache.